After receiving the message that my husband had been promoted, I went to the office to congratulate him and tell him the truth about who I really was, the truth I had been hiding. But instead, I saw him thanking the boss who had promoted him with a passionate kiss behind closed doors. Without saying a word, I walked away. But 24 hours later, he was begging me, "I am Emily Thompson. Before I begin, tell me which city you're listening from. Write the name of that place in the comments so I can send a small greeting flying through the night sky to the exact spot where you're sitting." I received David's message, my husband's, at 4:17 p.m. Just one sentence. "I've been appointed." Regional Director, official, the message came with a thumbs up emoji, and another line a few minutes later. "Thank you for always being by my side." I stared at the phone screen, my finger resting lightly on the glass edge as if touching something important. He was promoted at Thompson Realty, the place where I grew up with the sound of printers, the golden-plated elevators, the real estate blueprints signed by my father back when I was barely able to walk. But David didn't know that. We had met while both working as brokers, then married 2 years later. In our small apartment, I started preparing a little celebration for him. I chose the red wine he loved, grilled thick, fragrant steaks, and carefully decorated a chocolate cake with the words, "Congratulations, David," written in white cream. In my hands, I cradled a handmade gift box. Inside was a love letter, written with all my heart, and our wedding photo, where he looked at me like I was his whole world. Tonight, I decided I would finally tell him the truth. I was the daughter of William Thompson, chairman of Thompson Realty. My father had once asked me to hide my identity to avoid accusations of favoritism, but now, with David's promotion, I wanted to support him openly for us to move forward together with no more secrets between us. I put on a navy blue dress, not too fancy, but formal enough if I had to face his colleagues. When I stepped into the lobby, the neon lights reflected off the marble floor, making me squint slightly. I was about to knock on David's office door when a female employee I had seen a few times stopped me as she forced a smile. "David is still having a late meeting with Sarah," she said, her voice loaded with insinuation, fingers sketching a quotation marks in the air. My stomach dropped, a bad feeling creeping in. Sarah was David's direct boss, and the whispers about their private meetings weren't the first I had heard. But I hadn't believed them. I stepped into the elevator anyway, and with each floor rising, my chest tightened more, as though the height of the building was pressing down on my lungs. By the time I reached the 15th floor, my palms were damp though the air conditioning was blasting. The executive floors felt different, distinctly quieter, more private, with plush carpet that absorbed sound and unique artworks that probably cost more than David's annual salary. The conference office sat at the end of a long hallway with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city below. As I approached, I could hear voices inside. The familiar baritone of my husband mixed with the alluring laughter of a woman. They sounded relaxed, comfortable, intimate in a way that made my footsteps involuntarily slow. Through the clear glass pane, a sliver of curtain left carelessly drawn, I saw it, frozen in place instantly, David leaning in, kissing Sarah. Not rushed, not hidden, but deeply. This wasn't a mistake or a sudden impulse. Their gestures spoke of a practiced familiarity, of countless encounters before. And then, I heard Sarah's voice echo out, sharp and distinct, as if the entire building had shrunk to just the two of them. "Once you're promoted, divorce her." I don't want to wait anymore. The gift box slipped from my hand to the floor with a faint crack, Neither of them noticed the sound outside. They were still lost in that kiss. I didn't scream. I didn't barge in or make a scene. I stood there for a few seconds. Old promises replayed in my mind. I bent down, picked up the box, and quietly walked back down the hallway. I dropped it into a black trash bin. The love letter, the wedding photo, all now mixed with office waste. I can still remember the sound of the lid snapping shut. Quick, final, like something inside me had just been buried. I didn't look back. As I drove home, the streetlights of New York slid across the glass like blades cutting into memory. I thought about this morning, when this nightmare had never existed in my world. This morning began like any other. The sound of David's bare feet echoed across the hardwood floor of our apartment, the familiar whirring of the coffee grinder humming in the kitchen, and he wrapped his arms around me from behind, kissing the back of my neck the way he always did. A small thing, but enough to make me believe I was still loved. "Good morning, love," he whispered, setting a steaming cup of coffee on the kitchen counter. The scent of hazelnut filled the room, mixing with the cool breeze from the open window overlooking the little garden, his warm body enveloping mine perfectly, like two puzzle pieces fitting together. I leaned into his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of cedarwood soap and something that was uniquely his. "You remembered the cream, right?" I mumbled, my face pressed against his chest. "Just the way you like it," he replied, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my back. "Not too sweet, with a little cinnamon." David knew exactly how I liked my coffee, just as I knew he liked soft-boiled eggs and toast barely golden. These small things had built the foundation for the love I believed was unshakable. I still remember smiling, turning to tell him about the trip to Tuscany I wanted to book for our 2-year anniversary. David's body tensed slightly beside me, so quick I almost missed it. "Sounds expensive," he said flatly. "Are you sure we can afford more time off?" "David, we've been saving for 2 years. Our account has never been better." I turned to look at him in the morning light. The dark circles under his eyes were deeper than usual, and his jaw carried the familiar tension that had become more common these past months. "You look tired," I said, touching his cheek. "You deserve a break more than anyone." He pulled me back, kissing the top of my head. "You're right. I'm just stressed about the promotion decision. Sarah's been reviewing my file all week." Sarah. He mentioned her more and more often, always paired with work anxiety and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe respect or admiration mixed with something more intense. "She'll promote you," I said firmly. "Your projects are outstanding, David. You have to believe that." And as if remembering, I opened the cabinet and took out the small box I had prepared all week. Inside was a silver Rolex with a navy blue dial, just like the one he had once admired in a magazine. I handed it to him and said, "You can't control time, but you can choose how to use it, with the one you love." David unwrapped the gift. His eyes lit up with amazement as he opened the box. Then he pulled me into his arms, whispering, "Thank you. No one understands me like you do." He held me tightly, almost desperately. "I really don't deserve someone as thoughtful and talented as you." At that moment, I thought it was genuine gratitude. Now I wonder if that was the only honest thing he said to me that morning. After our gentle breakfast, David left for work, and I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the monthly financial papers. This division of tasks had naturally formed in our marriage. David focused on his relentless career, seeming uninterested in family finances, while I liked managing money, tracking income from my own real estate jobs at other firms where I was gaining experience at my father's suggestion, before I returned to take it over. Logging into online banking, I felt the familiar satisfaction at seeing the numbers. Not massive, but the product of our effort. Our joint account held $520,891, built from my earnings and bonuses, 80% from real estate work, and David's steady salary. Our savings account had $310,240, reserved for vacations and bigger plans. I had set up an automatic system so David's life ran smoothly. Every convenience, every small luxury to make his demanding career easier. And he was the one who took it, used it, and then betrayed me, not just with a kiss, but with trust. And I began to understand that when my father asked me to hide my identity, he wasn't only pushing me to grow on my own. He was testing whether love, in a place without privilege, without advantage, was real. And I believed it was. But now I know. I was deceived, not only by David, but by my own belief in the invisible fairness I once wanted to protect. I walked into the apartment. The sound of the door closing echoed like a heavy sigh. The celebration I had prepared was still there, the red wine glimmering under the kitchen lights, 2 marinated steaks left uncooked, untouched wine glasses, the chocolate cake now looking pathetic with the words, "Congratulations, David," scrawled across it like mockery. I collapsed onto the sofa, my body drained of strength, and finally the tears spilled out, hot and rolling down my cheeks. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from David. "I'm celebrating with colleagues. Home late. Love you." I stared at the words as if they weren't meant for me, as if they had been sent to another version of me, the naive one who still believed in loyalty after a promotion. "Love you," he wrote. And I found it funny, the way he slipped those words into a text, like a cloth draped over bloodstains, soft, familiar, but filthy. How dare he send me those words after holding Sarah in his arms? I deleted the message, but the pain remained, searing. I couldn't sit still. I opened my laptop, logged into the banking app, my fingers flying across the keys. With a few clicks, I froze all of David's credit cards, the cards he used to indulge himself, from fine dining to everyday luxuries. For the past year, I had been the one working until 2 a.m. to close contracts, the one depositing more than 80% of the income into our joint account, the one freelancing for smaller firms to gain more experience. And he lived off what I created. And now, he was using it to fund a dream that didn't include me. Next, I called a local locksmith. "I need all the locks changed immediately," I said into the phone, my voice calm but firm. The locksmith arrived within 30 minutes, the sound of drills and hammers filling the apartment, each screw like a declaration. I was taking back control. I stood watching him work, arms folded, my face rigid, but inside was a storm, a mix of pain and newfound strength. When he handed me the new keys, I gripped them tight, the cold metal reminding me David would not walk into this home again without my permission. I began contacting lawyers. I texted Rachel Adams, my family's attorney. I sent an email right away. "I need your help. Please get in touch soon." At the same time, I started gathering evidence, reopening the bank account, printing suspicious transactions. I thought of recent months, when David had been working later than usual. "Sarah needs me to review some projects," he would say, staying at the office until 9 or 10 p.m. "She's pushing hard for my promotion. I have to put in the effort." The expensive dinners charged to the credit card, dinners he claimed were with clients, the new perfume scent I had once caught on his shirt, which I had naively thought meant he was refreshing himself, the more frequent gym visits, him returning with a glow I once found attractive, once thought was a sign he was taking care of himself. Now I knew he wasn't doing it for me. Those details now came together as a clear picture. I wandered the apartment, cleaning up David's belongings. His things had begun to fill the guest room. When had that space slowly turned into his own? The expensive suits in the closet, ones I didn't remember him buying. A receipt stuffed into a jacket pocket, from La Mer, the fancy restaurant he had never taken me to. The wedding photo on the mantel, me and David, young and naive, me in my lace gown, looking at him as though he held the key to eternal happiness. That girl had no idea she was marrying a master liar. I sat at the kitchen table, where just this morning I had gone over finances, once feeling safe and loved, now feeling only foolish. The travel brochures scattered on the table mocked me. David had once been excited talking about that trip, about new adventures, about taking our love to the next level. Now I wondered, when had his plans for the next level without me begun? I waited for a breakdown, for sobbing, denial, or desperate phone calls to friends for comfort. But no, something colder, sharper, rose in my mind. The instincts my father had instilled in me since I was old enough to understand. I thought of my work, the long hours at competing real estate firms where I pushed myself to prove my worth. I thought of the joint account, the savings, mostly built from my labor. David had no idea how tightly I had managed our finances, how wisely I had invested, how many income streams I had built through my own work. He saw me as the sweet wife, the supporter, handling the tedious financial details so he could chase his career. He didn't know who he was up against. My phone buzzed again. Another message from David. Still thinking about this morning and your amazing gift. You are the best thing. I called James. He was my best friend since high school, and he also worked at Thompson Realty in a different department. The phone rang only twice before he answered. Emily! His voice was filled with worry. I sat in the dark living room, the streetlight spilling through the window, casting my shadow long across the floor. I spoke without circling around. You know, don't you? David and Sarah. On the other end, James was silent for a long time, only his breathing audible. Finally, he said, Yes, I saw. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice trembling. How long, James? How long have you known without telling me? I heard a chair scrape on his end, as if he had stood up. About 3 months ago, he admitted. I saw them too close in the hotel lobby after a business trip. But at the time, I had no proof. I was afraid if I told you, you'd think I was making it up. He paused. I investigated. And now, I have what you need. Then he ended with an offer to meet wherever I chose. I stared at the phone for several minutes, processing what it meant. A childhood friend had been quietly protecting me, trying to uncover David's professional life because he couldn't bear to watch me being deceived. The kindness from someone close felt overwhelming against the casual cruelty of David. I replied immediately, suggesting we meet at a quiet cafe 20 minutes from my apartment. He arrived with a laptop and a small silver USB. We chose a corner table slightly away from others, shielding our conversation from nearby diners. James ordered coffee, and only then did I really look at him. Still the same intelligent dark eyes and modestly professional demeanor that radiated competence without drawing attention. But he was thinner, more mature than the last time we saw each other, the last time I had turned down his confession. I didn't even know how to name what I felt. Part grief from betrayal, part warmth from James's concern, part shame. I want to begin with a sincere apology, he said, his voice gentle but steady. What I'm about to show you will be hard to take, but you deserve to know the truth about your marriage. He made clear he wasn't driven by office politics or personal resentment. James opened his laptop and displayed screenshots of emails. They looked damning, like evidence laid out in a courtroom. His fingers trembled slightly as he arranged the files, and I could see the real pain this revelation caused him. I discovered these emails by accident, James explained. David and Sarah had used company resources for personal matters, and then I saw enough intimacy to compel me to check their communications more closely. He paused, watching my face with sympathetic concern. I never wanted to uncover their affair, and I certainly never wanted you to suffer this, Emily. I struggled for weeks with whether to contact you. Part of me was afraid you wouldn't believe me, but the other part knew you were being systematically deceived by people who should respect you and company policy. The first email James showed me was dated 3.5 months ago, sent from David's company account to a man named Mark Thompson, apparently a college friend now living in Seattle. The tone was intimate, which only made the content more devastating. "You're right about office affairs being risky," David had written, "but sometimes the risk is worth the reward. Sarah is creating opportunities that could give me the edge to advance, and the personal benefits aren't a burden. Emily has no idea. I had been too busy with my work and projects to notice that he was building his real future." My hand clenched unconsciously at David's dismissal of my career as incompetent. The very work that generated 80% of our household income, which David always claimed to respect and admire, was reduced to a trivial job that merely kept me occupied. The second email was worse. David described Sarah as everything I was not: ambitious, refined, focused on real success instead of illusions of capability. He discussed their relationship with the calculated detachment of someone structuring a business deal rather than indulging in passionate infidelity. Sarah had hinted at an opportunity in a new branch of the company, and they were planning to move there together, with a six-figure salary, executive benefits, and a partner who understood the corporate world. His affair was presented as an upgrade, a stepping stone for his career. Reading those words felt like being slapped again and again. David had endured our marriage while plotting his escape into what he considered a better life. Every encouragement he gave me, every romantic gesture, every moment of support seemed now like performance art to keep me compliant while he positioned himself for betrayal. James. That night, David never came home. His last message was only, "Don't wait. I'm busy." I looked at the cold words on the screen and then placed the phone face down on the table. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second striking my mind like a reminder. My time, for years, had been wasted on someone unworthy. I sat on the sofa until the sky outside the window began to change color, the pale light of dawn slipping through the curtains, falling on the dining table where the untouched wine glasses still sat from the night I had prepared for him. They were still there, evidence of a love betrayed, of a celebration abandoned. I stood, picked up my keys, and drove straight to my father's office at headquarters. My father, William, sat behind the large oak desk, his face stern under the lamp, the lines deeper after decades of building his empire. I walked in, closed the door, and sat opposite him, my hand gripping the envelope of evidence from James that I had printed out. "Dad, I need to talk," I said, my voice steady though my eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. He looked up, his blue eyes, so much like mine, flickered with worry. "Emily, you look exhausted." I took a deep breath, then told him everything. About seeing David and Sarah kiss, about the evidence of the affair, the misuse of company funds, and his plan to divorce me. My father listened, his face paling, his hand gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles whitened. I drew in another breath when I spoke of David mocking my gullibility, my voice catching, but I held back, refusing to let tears fall. My father stood, placing his hand on my shoulder. "I asked you to hide your identity so you could stand on your own, but I never expected." I shook my head, tightening my grip on his hand. "Dad, thank you. It helped me truly learn. I know this lesson was necessary, and now I'm ready." He looked straight into my eyes. "Then come back and take over the company. Officially, no more hiding." That very afternoon, I met Rachel. Her office was small but sharp, papers stacked neatly in piles, walls lined with framed certificates of her courtroom victories. Rachel wore a black suit, her hair tied in a tight bun, her eyes bright and quick. She shook my hand, firm and decisive. "I've reviewed the documents James sent. There's enough evidence of adultery, corporate policy violation, and misuse of funds. But I need more. I'll investigate the transfers, the assets under Sarah's name, and whatever David has tried to hide from you." I nodded, placing in front of her the bank statements I had printed the night before. "Here's the $50,000 transfer to Sarah. And this," I pushed forward another stack of papers, "is everything I've found over the past 3 months. Numbers don't lie, Rachel. They are betrayal written in digits." Rachel flipped through each page, her eyes as sharp as blades. "Good. We'll file for divorce on grounds of betrayal and financial fraud. I'll also demand an internal investigation into Sarah's conduct. Relationships between superiors and subordinates are a serious violation. Once this is public, neither of them will have a place left." I listened to her words, feeling pain and relief at the same time. Pain because the whole truth was now laid out in black and white, but relief because I was no longer alone. My father stood behind me. Rachel sat across from me, and James continued his quiet support. For the first time in months, I no longer felt like the naive woman being led by the nose. I was the one preparing a counterattack, a strike they would never forget. James called me with an update. The branch meeting was set for 2:45 p.m., he explained, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a plan about to unfold perfectly. I checked the schedule one last time. David's presentation was slated for 3 p.m., after the company overview and financial forecast. He would present the latest real estate project to staff and a few shareholders of Thompson Realty, likely basking in the recognition of his promotion. Sarah would be beside him, representing executive leadership that seemed to have endorsed his outstanding talent. "Remember," James said, "once the papers are served, speak clearly and completely, and let the legal documents speak for themselves." The main conference room of Thompson Realty spanned the entire 16th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, a declaration of the company's ambition and success. At 2:50 p.m., the space buzzed with around 70 people, corporate shareholders in expensive suits, and employees from junior staff to senior partners. David stood at the head of the table in a deep blue suit, remote in hand to advance his slides, his voice so confident it seemed to stretch the air taut with each figure he cited. Sarah sat in the front row, legs crossed, fingers tapping lightly on the cover of her notebook, her eyeliner-sharp eyes fixed on him. They looked comfortable together, perhaps relishing the secret thrill of their affair playing out before an unsuspecting audience. When I pushed the door open, the sound of my heels struck 3 hollow beats across the glass-walled room, and I sat beside my father. He only tilted his head briefly to glance at me, his calm gaze that of a man who had weathered every storm. A few people gave me curious looks. David carried on with enthusiasm. His voice filled the room, confident and compelling, while Sarah nodded at key points. They had likely rehearsed this performance together in their private meetings, perfecting a veneer of professional chemistry to hide their personal entanglement. 25 minutes into the presentation, I saw Rachel enter through the main doors. As David concluded, I noticed my father, William Thompson, shift his posture, leaning back, his eyes sweeping the room before he gave a subtle nod to his secretary, and then Rachel's voice rang out, cold and clear. "Before we conclude, I need to present a compliance finding." She stepped forward, inserted a USB, and the screen flickered from glittering renderings to a new interface, scrolling through the first page of a legal document detailing charges of adultery, financial fraud, and conspiracy to steal marital assets. The color drained from David's face as he realized the evidence James had uncovered was now formalized into legal language, complete with email transcripts and financial analysis documenting every facet of 3 months of deception. The room fell into absolute silence, everyone holding their breath as David absorbed the legal documents, dismantling his life in real time. Sarah leaned closer, perhaps trying to read over his shoulder and grasp the scope of their exposure. Next came the statements. In 6 months, total irregular expenses reimbursed to David M. amounted to $300,000, categorized as training, project consulting, travel, but GPS data and actual receipts match bookings at the Celestine Miami, Sorel restaurant, and high-end jewelry transactions. The primary recipient account was Sarah's. Rachel spoke evenly, clicking through slides, each email appearing, promises of promotion, schemes to steal marital assets and commit financial fraud. In that instant, I saw Sarah's hand pull back, her pen slipping from her fingers to the table with a sharp clatter, while David lurched toward the microphone. "This is private. Lies! Who authorized?" Rachel raised a hand, cutting him off with words dry as paper. "A preservation order was signed, the chain of custody intact with complete metadata, and this constitutes a violation of superior subordinate relations. Clause 4.2. Immediate suspension pending investigation is recommended." The CFO bent over the reconciliation sheet, adjusting his glasses. "Expense codes align. No valid authorization." HR opened a file, her voice small but firm. "Direct superior subordinate relationships are zero tolerance." My lawyer handed Sarah an envelope of her own. The polished corporate image she had crafted disintegrated as she accepted the manila folder containing allegations of conspiracy, ethics violations, and details of abuse of executive power. Her face went pale as she realized her secret relationship with David had been documented, dissected, and was now being exposed before directors, shareholders, and the entire branch staff. She understood her career was ending in the most public and humiliating way possible. Whispers rippled across the room, colleagues' eyes flicking between shock and curiosity, a few bowing their heads to mutter. 70 witnesses to the spectacular downfall of two people who once believed themselves too clever, too careful, and too powerful to face consequences for their choices. But consequences, as David and Sarah were learning, do not care how clever you think you are. I rose then, stepping forward, my hand resting on the back of the empty chair at the head of the table, calm as though everything had been preordained. "I am Emily Thompson," I said, "daughter of Chairman William Thompson." I heard chairs scrape, a few sharp intakes of breath, David whipping around, his face ashen as if all blood had drained from him. "Emily! You!" Sarah frowned, forcing a strained smile. But I didn't look at them. I looked directly at the board. "This is my personal matter, but today I must disclose it for the safety of the company first." David grabbed for my hand. "Emily, listen to me. This is all just—" I tilted my head, my eyes on the Rolex glinting under the lights on his wrist, the gift from that morning symbolizing our love. Then I spoke softly, yet the whole room heard. "Time doesn't go backwards, David. Here, only truth is measured." I pulled my hand free, my gaze unwavering. Sarah jumped up, her voice rapid. "That was entertaining a client?" Rachel lifted a statement. "Which client checks into a double suite overlooking the ocean that night?" Security waited politely at the back. David gave a twisted smile, tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The only sound was a loud swallow. They surrendered their badges, stepped back, the glass doors closing behind them, leaving in the room only the faint scent of freshly printed paper and the steady hum of the projector's fan. My father turned to me, speaking to the board. Regional Director Emily will assume oversight of the project review and implement leadership replacement. The project vote will be postponed until after audit. I nodded, gathered the files Rachel had handed me into a leather folder, and looked up at the screen, where the shimmering renderings had gone dark to a flat gray, like a curtain closing on an old performance, making way for a new chapter where everything would be called by its true name. The company terminated David's contract, and Sarah's case was handed over to the corporate legal department. ACT 7. 4 months later, the trial took place in a dark wood courtroom that smelled of freshly printed paper and ink. I sat on the left beside Rachel, my hand resting on the case files, my eyes straight ahead. David sat across from me, tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes, his fingers gripping the edge of his chair, glancing at me now and then as if searching for an exit that had already been sealed. The judge struck the gavel with a dry crack, and our marriage was dissolved, based on evidence of infidelity, breach of marital financial duty, and unauthorized expenditures. The court ruled I was entitled to full ownership of all marital assets and an additional $100,000 settlement from David. The house was not divided because it had always been mine. When the gavel fell again, I heard a faint sound inside my chest, like an old door closing. Outside the courtroom, David called after me, his voice breaking, "Emily! Please listen!" James tilted his head slightly to shield me, and I turned half a step, saying just loud enough for him to hear, "I've heard enough." Then I signed the transfer papers, my final signature closing a false marriage. The next day, I walked into Thompson Realty in my new role, Regional Director. My father, William, stood in the lobby, his eyes gleaming with pride as he handed me an ID badge reading, "Emily Thompson, Director." "No more hiding, daughter," he said, his voice deep and warm. "Show the world who you are." I nodded, feeling the weight of the badge in my hand, not just a position, but a chance to shape the future anew. The following months were an unrelenting journey. I worked late into the night alongside James, now my trusted assistant, the glow of the computer screens lighting his tired but determined face. I restructured the team, implemented strategies for sustainable growth, and expanded Thompson Realty's project portfolio. I personally met with major clients, pitching green urban developments with the passion David had once mocked as small scale. Every contract signed, every project completed was another hammer blow shattering his lies. One morning, as dawn cast its golden light through the 16th floor office windows, I received the quarterly financial report. Thompson Realty had surpassed its competitors, becoming the leading real estate brand in the Northeast. Colleagues applauded when I entered the meeting room, but I only smiled faintly, my hand resting on the handcrafted leather box on the table, the gift I had once made for David but never gave, now filled with my own development plans. A year passed like a long dream, where the fragments of the past were carried away by the wind, leaving room for new light. David and Sarah, after their scandal at Thompson Realty, had unraveled like two lines that intersect once and then diverge forever. I heard they broke up in bitterness. The promises once whispered in the dark now turned to accusations. David lost his job. The reputation he had built in real estate dissolved into smoke, like a building collapsing under a storm. Sarah, whose executive career had been her pride, did not escape either. She was fired, shunned by partners, her name now mentioned only in hushed, regretful whispers in company hallways. I did not seek news of them, but sometimes fragments reached me, like seashell shards washed up by the tide, carrying no meaning for me anymore. I stood on the sand by Hudson Bay, where the sunset painted the water gold, the waves lapping gently like a lullaby. The wind brushed through my hair, carrying the salty breath of the sea, and I felt freedom, light, effortless. In my hand, I held a cup of coffee, a simple white ceramic mug, newly bought at a weekend market. It carried no memory of David, no broken promises, only something new, ready for new moments. James walked up beside me, his shoes crunching softly against the sand. He smiled, warm and sincere, his dark eyes shining with a tenderness I had learned to value. "Sand's all over my shoes," he said, his voice as light as the sea breeze. "But it's worth it, walking with you like this." I laughed, a laugh no longer forced or hidden, but as natural as breath. James, the man who had stood with me through the storm, not just with envelopes of evidence, but with honesty and kindness that demanded nothing. He never asked me to be anyone else, never made me question my worth. We began our relationship with simple things: coffee at the lighthouse, late-night talks about dreams and fears, the times he held my hand, gentle but firm, as if to say I would never have to face the world alone again. Today, we walked along the shore, unhurried, with nothing to prove. I stopped, picked up a smooth pebble from the sand, felt its coolness in my palm, and tossed it far out, watching it skip. Across the water, leaving ripples that spread and then disappeared. "Like the past," I whispered. "It touches us, then drifts away." James nodded, saying nothing, just standing by me, present like a lighthouse, steady in the night. I turned to him, the sunset reflected in his eyes. He took my hand, our fingers interlacing, and love was simply that. Straightforward, steady, a hand placed at the right moment, a silence that didn't frighten. I rested my head on his shoulder, listening to my heart beat steady, peaceful, like the simple rhythm of life I had long waited for. And in that evening glow, I saw clearly that my change was not about winning or losing, keeping or losing, but about a clean space I had created through decisiveness and kindness, where promises were no longer cloths to cover wounds, but small bridges carrying me toward tomorrow.